Black elderly woman humiliated at the bank, but Vin Diesel was there. Some stories begin in the most ordinary places, on a regular day, yet end up revealing the deepest truths about human nature. That's exactly what happened one late afternoon at the First Pacific Bank on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. The bank was crowded, long lines stretched from the service counters to the entrance. Customers shuffled impatiently, checking their watches, whispering frustrated complaints under their breath. The air felt thick with tension, while employees rushed back and forth, struggling to keep up with the chaos. Behind the counter, Brittany Wallace, a young bank teller with tired eyes and an impatient demeanor, typed away at her computer. She had worked here long enough to know which customers mattered and which didn't. And in her mind, the elderly woman standing before her wasn't worth much attention. Linda Carter, a 73-year-old retired schoolteacher, clutched an envelope in her slightly trembling hands. She had always been independent, never the type to ask for favors, but today she needed answers. She had noticed unexplained fees being deducted from her account, small amounts, yet significant enough to impact her already tight monthly budget. Living on a fixed pension, every dollar counted. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped forward and spoke politely. "Good afternoon. I believe there's been a mistake in my account. I've been charged fees I wasn't informed about." Brittany barely glanced up, still tapping away at her keyboard. "Those are standard account maintenance fees, ma'am," she replied flatly. Linda hesitated, holding out her receipt. "But I've had this account for years and never seen these charges before." With an exaggerated sigh, Brittany finally looked at her, annoyance clear in her expression. Snatching the envelope from Linda's hands, she flipped through the papers half-heartedly before shoving them back. "It's in the fine print of your agreement. If you didn't read it, that's not our fault." Linda blinked, taken aback. A few people in line chuckled quietly at her expense. Brittany rolled her eyes. "If you want to avoid fees," she continued in a condescending tone, "keep more money in your account. That's how banks work, ma'am." The humiliation had begun. Linda's throat tightened. She wasn't here to argue, just to understand. She had been a loyal customer for decades, yet now, she felt invisible. And worst of all, no one around her seemed to care. The same customers who had been loudly complaining about their own long wait times suddenly found it easy to ignore her. "I just want to understand what happened," Linda said, her voice quieter, but still holding on to hope. At that moment, Carl Jensen, the branch manager, walked over. He had been observing from a distance, arms crossed, as if deciding whether this situation was worth his time. Carl was a man who believed time was money, and to him, Linda Carter wasn't worth much of either. He cleared his throat and gave her a thin smile. "Is there a problem here?" His tone made it clear he wasn't expecting an actual answer. Brittany straightened immediately, as if a soldier reporting to a superior.
"No, sir.
Just a customer who doesn't understand our policies." Carl turned his gaze to Linda, his polite smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Ma'am, we have standard fees in place. If you can't maintain the minimum balance, there's nothing we can do." Linda squared her shoulders, trying to hold onto her dignity. "I've always kept my account in good standing," she said firmly. "These fees just started appearing. All I'm asking is for someone to review them." Carl let out a short, amused chuckle. "What's in the system is in the system, ma'am. We don't review automated charges." Then, the final blow. Carl leaned slightly over the counter, his voice loud enough for the entire bank to hear. "If you can't afford the fees, maybe this bank isn't the right place for you." A sharp silence filled the room. Linda swallowed the lump in her throat, gripping the envelope tighter. She had never felt so small. But then, a deep, steady voice cut through the air. "Why are you talking to her like that?" The entire bank went silent. Heads turned toward the entrance. A man in a black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap stood there. At first glance, he looked like any other customer. But something about him, his posture, his voice, his presence, made people straighten up. Carl turned slowly, irritation flashing across his face. "And who are you to question how we handle our customers?" The man took a few steps forward and pulled off his cap. The gasps were immediate. Vin Diesel. Yes, that Vin Diesel. The Fast and Furious legend. The action star known for playing the toughest, most fearless characters on screen. And now he was standing in the middle of the bank, staring Carl Jensen down. Carl's confidence wavered. Mr. Diesel, I. Vin raised a hand slightly, cutting him off. His voice was calm, but firm. It doesn't matter who I am, he said. What matters is why you're treating this woman like this. Linda turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. Carl cleared his throat, trying to maintain control. Sir, this is none of your business. We have policies in place, and this lady doesn't meet the requirements. Vin tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Then, with a slow, knowing smile, he asked, policies? Or an excuse to humiliate someone who's just asking for fairness? A few customers murmured in agreement. Brittany, who had been so confident earlier, now glanced nervously at Carl. Vin turned back to Linda, his voice softer. Ma'am, what exactly is the issue? Can you show me what's going on? Hesitating for a moment, Linda handed him the envelope. Vin carefully scanned the documents, his eyes narrowing slightly. This is a mistake, Vin said plainly. These charges shouldn't be here. You're going to fix this. Carl opened his mouth, but Vin raised his hand again, stopping him. If it's a mistake, you'll fix it, Vin continued, his voice steady. And if it's not, his voice dropped slightly, becoming even more controlled. Then it's going to be a much bigger problem for you. Carl's face paled. Brittany fidgeted nervously. The tension in the room was thick. Carl swallowed hard, shifting his weight. But Vin stood firm, waiting for an answer. For the first time that day, Carl Jensen looked truly nervous. And that's when everything changed.